On the night of January 16th, 1920, the bartender at the Knickerbocker Hotel polished his last crystal tumbler and poured his final martini. The cocktail he invented, the drink that had made this bar the most profitable square footage in Manhattan, would never again be legally served inside these walls. At midnight, the Volstead Act became law. By morning, the hotel's revenue model had collapsed. Within 3 years, the Knickerbocker would close forever, its grand ballrooms gutted and converted into lifeless office space. But this is not a story about alcohol. This is a story about what happens when a single law destroys the economic foundation beneath a palace. Chapter 1. When Astor's empire needed a crown. Colonel John Jacob Astor needed a monument, and he chose the dirtiest corner of Manhattan to build it. The year was 1906. Times Square barely existed yet. Locals still called it Longacre Square, after the horse market that had defined the neighborhood for decades. Horse traders, brothels, and low-rent theaters clustered around the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street. The air smelled of manure and cheap whiskey. Most Manhattan hoteliers considered the area commercial suicide. Astor saw something different. He saw transformation. The first subway line had just opened. Electric lights were replacing gas lamps. Theater producers were moving north from Herald Square, chasing cheaper real estate. Longacre was shedding its skin. Astor believed the new Times Square would become the entertainment capital of America. He wanted his hotel standing at its heart when it happened. The mathematics were audacious. $5 million for land acquisition and construction. Most luxury hotels of the era cost $2 million at most. Astor was betting double on an unproven location. His family questioned the decision. His business advisors called it reckless. A hotel needed established clientele, they argued. It needed proximity to Grand Central or the financial district. It needed guarantees. Astor ignored them all. He hired the architectural firm Marvin & Davis to design a 14-story Beaux Arts palace. He specified the finest materials available: imported Italian marble, Baccarat crystal chandeliers, custom-woven carpets from Belgium. The building would be so magnificent that location would become irrelevant. Grandeur itself would be the draw. But Astor understood something his critics missed. A hotel was not just rooms. It was theater, and theater needed an audience willing to pay for the performance. Times Square was about to deliver that audience by the thousands. Broadway shows were getting longer. Dinner hour was pushing later. Theater goers needed somewhere elegant to drink before curtain and celebrate after final bow. Astor was not building a hotel. He was building the green room for Times Square itself. Construction began in 1905. 14 stories rose from bedrock, dwarfing everything around it. The facade featured elaborate stonework, arched windows, and a roofline decorated with urns and balustrades. The design announced permanence and power. This was a building meant to last centuries. The ground floor was the crown jewel, a marble lobby with 30-foot ceilings, a restaurant seating 200, and at the southeast corner, facing both Broadway and 42nd Street, the King Cole Bar. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany paneling. A 40-foot bar backed by mirrors and shelves of crystal. The bar was no afterthought. It was the entire point. Astor had calculated the revenue model precisely. The Knickerbocker would have 556 guest rooms, each renting for $12 per night. But rooms were low margin. Operating costs consumed most of the income. The real profit would come from the ground floor, from diners who spent $20 on a meal, from drinkers who ordered $5 cocktails and stayed for 3 rounds. The hotel's financial survival depended on convincing wealthy New Yorkers that the Knickerbocker was not just a place to sleep, it was the place to be seen. April 17, 1906. Opening day approached, where Astor had spent $5 million on a neighborhood most people still associated with horses and vice. He had built a palace in a slum and bet his family legacy that the slum would transform around it. The wager was about to pay off. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Extravagance. Architect Marvin and Davis designed a building that demanded guests spend money the moment they crossed the threshold. The Knickerbocker's layout was psychological warfare disguised as hospitality. Guest rooms occupied floors 3 through 14. But reaching those rooms required passing through a ground floor deliberately engineered for spending. The elevator bank sat at the rear of the lobby. Every guest had to walk the full length of the marble entrance hall, past the restaurant entrance, past the bar's glowing windows, before they could retreat to private quarters. The path was not accidental. It was commercial choreography. The lobby ceiling soared 30 feet overhead. Enormous baccarat chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls of light. The walls featured Italian marble panels in cream and gold. The floor was a geometric mosaic of colored stone, each piece hand-cut and fitted. Every surface reflected light. Every angle created depth. The space felt infinite. Walking into the Knickerbocker lobby triggered immediate recalibration of social status. You either belonged in rooms like this or you did not. And if you did belong, you understood the unspoken rule. You demonstrated belonging by spending. The restaurant occupied the western side of the ground floor. 200 seats arranged beneath another cascade of crystal chandeliers, iron-starched white tablecloths, sterling silver place settings. A menu that changed daily based on what the chef found fresh that morning at Washington Market. Dinner cost $20 per person, equivalent to a week's wages for a working-class New Yorker. But the restaurant was merely prelude. The main performance happened in the King Cole Bar. The bar dominated the southeast corner, 50 feet long and 30 feet deep. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced both Broadway and 42nd Street. Passers-by could look directly inside and see Manhattan's elite performing their wealth. The interior glowed warm and golden. Mahogany paneling covered the walls. Gas lamps with frosted glass shades provided intimate pools of light. The bar itself was a 40-foot length of polished wood, backed by a mirrored wall lined with shelves of crystal decanters and imported spirits. Behind the bar worked Martini di Arma di Taggia, an Italian immigrant who had trained in London and Paris before Astor recruited him specifically for the Knickerbocker. Di Taggia understood that bartending at an elite hotel was not about mixing drinks. It was about creating theater. Every cocktail was a small performance. Every pour was carefully measured, visibly expensive. The furniture throughout the ground floor reinforced the message of exclusivity. Leather club chairs from England, marble-topped tables from France, Persian rugs layered 3 deep in some areas. The combined cost of furnishing the public spaces exceeded $200,000, and you could buy a small hotel for that amount. But Astor knew the math. Luxury was not decoration. Luxury was permission to charge premium prices. A cocktail that cost 50 cents to make could sell for $5 if served in the right room by the right bartender to the right clientele. The upper floors maintained the illusion, but reduced the excess. Guest rooms ranged from modest singles at $8 per night to lavish suites at $25. Each room featured custom furniture, private bathrooms, and electric lighting. This was 1906. Most New York apartments still used gas lamps and shared hallway toilets, but the upper floors were never meant to generate profit. They were overhead. The building's financial logic concentrated entirely on the ground floor, on the restaurant, on the bar, on convincing wealthy New Yorkers that spending an evening at the Knickerbocker was not merely entertainment, but social necessity. Architecture itself became the business model. The building was an elaborate machine for converting status anxiety into revenue. Every chandelier, every marble panel, every yard of imported carpet existed to make patrons feel they had entered a realm where normal economic rules did not apply, where $5 for a cocktail felt reasonable, where spending became performance and performance became identity. The Knickerbocker opened its doors on April 17, 1906. Within hours, the strategy proved devastatingly effective. Chapter 3. The night Caruso made it sacred. On April 17, 1906, opening night, Enrico Caruso walked into the King Cole Bar and transformed it into legend. Caruso was the most famous opera singer in the world. He performed at the Metropolitan Opera House just blocks away. His voice commanded $2,000 per performance, an astronomical sum. When Caruso chose the Knickerbocker Bar for his opening night celebration, he conferred upon it an authority money alone could never purchase. The bar was already crowded. Opening night had drawn Manhattan's elite like moths to electric light. Diamond Jim Brady sat at a corner table with Lillian Russell. Stanford White held court near the windows. Theater producers, Wall Street bankers, and society matrons filled every available seat. The air hummed with expensive perfume and cigar smoke. Then Caruso arrived. The room shifted. Conversations paused. And every eye tracked the great tenor as he walked to the bar and ordered a drink from Martini di Arma di Taggia. What happened next entered New York mythology. Di Taggia mixed a new cocktail he had been perfecting for weeks. He combined London dry gin with French vermouth and orange bitters, stirred it with ice until the mixing glass frosted, then strained it into a chilled coupe glass and garnished it with a twist of lemon peel. He presented it to Caruso with a slight bow. Caruso sipped. He smiled. He declared it perfection. Di Taggia named it the Martini after himself. Within weeks, it became the Knickerbocker's signature drink. Within months, it spread to every elite bar in Manhattan. Within years, the Martini was America's cocktail, the liquid emblem of sophistication itself. But the significance was not the drink. The significance was the alchemy. In that moment, when Caruso blessed Di Taggia's creation, the Knickerbocker transcended mere hospitality and entered the realm of cultural mythology. It became the place where important things happened, where fame validated fame, where being seen mattered as much as the drink in your hand. The opening week was a financial triumph. Every guest room booked solid. The restaurant turned away dozens nightly. The bar operated at capacity from 5 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning. Society columnists declared the Knickerbocker the new center of Manhattan social life. The numbers told the real story. Average room rate, $12 per night across all 556 rooms. Restaurant revenue, $8,000 weekly. Bar revenue, $5,000 weekly. The King Cole Bar alone generated $20,000 monthly, nearly half the hotel's operating expenses. Astor's gamble had worked. Times Square was transforming exactly as he predicted. New theaters opened monthly. Restaurants and shops multiplied. Electric signs blazed across building facades. The neighborhood was becoming the entertainment capital of America, and the Knickerbocker stood at its glittering heart. But the triumph contained a hidden fragility that would not reveal itself for 14 years. The hotel's entire business model rested on a foundation of vice, not sex, though plenty of discreet affairs unfolded in its upper-floor suites. Not gambling, though card games ran nightly in private rooms. The vice was alcohol, specifically on the sale of alcohol to wealthy people willing to pay enormous markups for the privilege of drinking in the right room with the right people. The King Cole Bar was not an amenity. It was the engine. 48% of net profit flowed from those 50 feet of mahogany and mirrors. The restaurant contributed another 20%. Room rentals covered the remaining 32% and all operating costs. The hotel was a bar that happened to have rooms above it. And in 1906, no one imagined that foundation could ever be outlawed. Caruso returned to the King Cole Bar dozens of times over the next 14 years. So did John Barrymore, George M. Cohan, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. The bar became shorthand for arrived success. If you drank at the Knickerbocker, you had made it. The hotel stood as monument to Astor's vision. That Times Square had indeed become the crossroads of American entertainment. Electric signs now blazed so bright that midnight looked like noon. Theaters packed every block. Restaurants served until dawn. The entire district ran on a nocturnal economy fueled by alcohol and ambition. The Knickerbocker had conquered New York. It printed money. Its bar was the most profitable square footage in Manhattan. Nothing could threaten it, except a constitutional amendment that would make the bar's entire existence illegal. Chapter 4: The Numbers Behind the Chandeliers. The Knickerbocker's balance sheets told a secret its glittering lobby never revealed. It was always barely profitable. Annual operating costs reached $400,000. The number was staggering, but every penny was necessary. 556 guest rooms required a staff of 320 employees working around the clock. Maids, bellhops, desk clerks, elevator operators, maintenance workers, kitchen staff, and management. Payroll alone consumed $180,000 annually. Then came the invisible expenses that ate away at revenue like termites in marble. Coal for heating the building through New York winters, $30,000 yearly. Electric lighting for every public space and guest room, $18,000. Water, gas, laundry services, linens, and daily supplies, another $40,000 combined. Insurance, property taxes, and mortgage payments to service Astor's $5 million construction debt, $90,000. The hotel needed to generate more than $1,000 daily just to break even. That was before accounting for profit, maintenance reserves, or unexpected repairs. The Knickerbocker operated on a financial knife edge disguised by baccarat chandeliers. Room revenue provided the foundation, but never enough to stand alone. 556 rooms, renting at an average rate of $12 per night, generated $6,672 daily at full occupancy. But the hotel rarely achieved full occupancy. Seasonal fluctuations meant summer months often ran at 60% capacity. Winter weeks could drop to 40% when snowstorms paralyzed the city. Average annual room revenue totaled approximately $1,400,000. Operating costs consumed $1 million of that immediately. The remaining $400,000 had to cover debt service, capital improvements, and profit distribution to Astor's estate. The math revealed an uncomfortable truth. Room rentals alone could not sustain the hotel's extravagant operation. The Knickerbocker needed supplementary revenue streams that generated higher margins. It needed the restaurant. It needed the bar. The restaurant performed adequately. Dinner service attracted 200 guests nightly during peak season. Average check, $20 per person. Nightly revenue, $4,000. Food costs and kitchen labor consumed 60%. Net margin, $1,600 per night, or roughly $500,000 annually. Respectable, but still not enough. The King Cole Bar was the difference between survival and bankruptcy. Bar operations generated $20,000 monthly from liquor sales alone. Annual total, $240,000. The economics were staggering. A bottle of imported gin cost the hotel $2. That bottle yielded 25 cocktails. Each martini sold for $5. Gross revenue per bottle, $125. After accounting for labor, glassware, and other costs, net profit per bottle exceeded $90. The markup was not exploitation. It was the price of atmosphere. Customers were not buying alcohol. They were buying permission to occupy space in the most glamorous room in Manhattan. They were purchasing proximity to fame, the chance that Caruso might sit 3 stools away, again, the social capital of saying they drank at the Knickerbocker. The bar's annual contribution to hotel profitability was extraordinary. $240,000 in revenue against minimal operating costs meant the King Cole Bar generated nearly $190,000 in pure profit. That represented 48% of the hotel's total net income. Without the bar, the Knickerbocker could not meet its debt obligations. Without the bar, there would be no money for maintaining the baccarat chandeliers or replacing the custom carpets. Without the bar, the entire financial structure collapsed. Management understood this dependency but considered it irrelevant. Alcohol had been legal in America since before there was an America. The idea that drinking could be outlawed seemed as absurd as banning bread or taxing sunlight. The Knickerbocker's business model felt eternal because the right to sell alcohol felt constitutional. Even when temperance movements gained political momentum in the 1910s, hotel executives dismissed the threat. Prohibition might come to rural Kansas or Baptist Mississippi, they reasoned, but never to New York, never to Manhattan. The economic consequences would be catastrophic. The government would never willingly destroy thousands of businesses and tens of thousands of jobs. The balance sheets told a different story. They revealed a magnificent building, wholly dependent on a single revenue stream that could vanish overnight if laws changed. They showed a palace built on sand, glittering and grand, sustained only by society's permission to sell vice. In 1919, that permission was about to be revoked. The 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution passed Congress in December 1917. It required ratification by 36 states to become law. Temperance advocates predicted years of state-by-state battles. They were wrong. Within 13 months, 46 states had ratified. On January 16, 1919, the amendment became constitutional law. But it lacked enforcement mechanisms. For 1 year, alcohol remained legal while Congress debated implementation. The Volstead Act, passed in October 1919, provided the teeth. It defined intoxicating beverages, established penalties, and created enforcement agencies. President Wilson vetoed it. Congress overrode his veto. The Volstead Act became law on January 17, 1920. The Knickerbocker had 12 months to prepare for the death of its most profitable asset. Management spent that year in denial, disguised as strategic planning. Chapter 5: When Washington Declared War on Vice. The temperance movement did not care that it was about to destroy New York's most profitable square footage. Prohibition was never about hotels, it was about salvation. The temperance crusade believed alcohol was the root of poverty, domestic violence, and moral decay. Eliminate drinking, they argued, and America would transform into a paradise of productive, sober citizens. The fact that thousands of businesses depended on legal alcohol sales was irrelevant. The fact that millions of Americans enjoyed drinking was beside the point. Its sin had to be eradicated, whatever the cost. The 18th Amendment emerged from decades of organizing by groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League. They built power methodically, state by state, constituency by constituency. They allied with progressive reformers who saw alcohol as a tool of industrial exploitation. They partnered with nativists who associated drinking with immigrant populations. They cultivated politicians who understood temperance. Voters delivered electoral victories. By 1917, the movement had achieved critical mass. World War I provided the final push. Wartime required sacrifice. Grain should feed soldiers, not ferment into whiskey. Sobriety was patriotic. Drinking was practically treason. The amendment passed Congress with shocking speed, and state ratification followed even faster. On January 16, 1919, the 18th Amendment became part of the Constitution. For the first time in American history, a specific behavior was constitutionally prohibited nationwide. But the amendment itself was toothless. It declared the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors illegal, but provided no definition of intoxicating, no enforcement mechanism, no penalties. Implementation required enabling legislation. Congress debated for months. Hotel owners watched those debates with growing alarm mixed with desperate optimism. Surely exceptions would be made for restaurants. Surely establishments serving wealthy clientele would receive special licenses. Surely the government understood that destroying the hospitality industry would trigger economic catastrophe. The Knickerbocker's management joined industry lobbying efforts. They hired lawyers to draft exemption proposals. They met with congressmen to explain the financial consequences. They argued that elite hotels were not the problem. Prohibition should target working-class saloons and immigrant dive bars, not establishments that serve senators and Supreme Court justices. Congress ignored them completely. The Volstead Act, passed in October 1919, was merciless in its clarity. Any beverage containing more than 0.5% alcohol was illegal. No exceptions for hotels, no special licenses for restaurants, no distinction between a Bowery Flophouse and the Knickerbocker. The law was absolute. President Woodrow Wilson vetoed the Volstead Act, calling it unenforceable. Congress overrode his veto within hours. The law would take effect at midnight on January 17, 1920. After that moment, every bottle of liquor, every glass of wine, every cocktail sold anywhere in America became a federal crime. Knickerbocker management still believed the situation was temporary. They convinced themselves that enforcement would be lax, that prohibition would prove so unpopular it would be repealed within months, that New York City authorities would look the other way. They prepared for disruption, not destruction. The hotel spent the final months of 1919 stockpiling wine. They purchased thousands of bottles and stored them in the basement, believing they could legally serve pre-Prohibition inventory. And they were wrong. The Volstead Act prohibited sale of any alcohol regardless of when it was acquired. They developed contingency plans for the King Cole Bar. Convert it to a soda fountain. Serve elaborate non-alcoholic punches. Host afternoon tea dances. Offer live music to attract crowds. They calculated that these alternatives might recoup 40% of bar revenue. Tight margins, but survivable. The calculation was fantasy built on denial. The bar's customers were not coming for soda or tea. They came to drink. They came to be seen drinking. They came because alcohol lowered inhibitions and elevated moods and made expensive rooms feel worth the price. Remove the alcohol, and you remove the entire reason for the King Cole Bar's existence. December 1919. Hotel occupancy remained strong through the holidays. The restaurant stayed fully booked. The bar operated at capacity every night as customers rushed to enjoy legal drinking while it still existed. Revenue actually increased as patrons spent recklessly, knowing the end was coming. Management misread this surge as evidence that demand would persist after Prohibition. They believed customers loyal to the Knickerbocker would continue visiting, alcohol or not. They were about to discover that loyalty to a building was no match for the desire for a drink. January 16, 1920. The final day of legal alcohol in America. The Knickerbocker prepared for Armageddon, disguised as a party. Chapter 6. The Last Legal Pour. January 16, 1920, was the last night Americans could legally order a drink at the Knickerbocker. The King Cole Bar opened at noon and immediately filled beyond capacity. Guests arrived with empty suitcases, planning to buy bottles in bulk before midnight. Others came simply to witness history, to say they were present for the final legal cocktail in New York's most famous bar. By 3 o'clock, the crowd spilled into the lobby. By 6 o'clock, the hotel stopped admitting new arrivals. Martini di Arma di Taggia worked behind the bar with mechanical efficiency. He had been mixing drinks at the Knickerbocker for 14 years. Tonight was his funeral for a profession. He poured gin, stirred vermouth, strained cocktails into chilled coupes. Each martini was identical to the one before and the one after. There was no time for theatrical presentation. Demand overwhelmed ceremony. The atmosphere was surreal, celebratory and mournful simultaneously. Strangers toasted each other. Regular customers ordered rounds for the entire room. Someone started singing. Others joined. The King Cole Bar became a wake for its own existence, drowning sorrow in the very thing being outlawed. Hotel management made one final attempt to profit from the apocalypse. They marked liquor prices up 50%. $5 cocktails became $7.50. No one complained. Money lost meaning when weighed against finality. Guests paid whatever was asked. By 10 o'clock, the bar had depleted its entire inventory of premium gin. Di Taggia switched to lesser brands. By 11, the vermouth ran out. He served gin on ice with olive garnish. Customers did not care. They were not drinking for taste. They were drinking to participate in collective defiance. 11:30. In hotel management circulated through the crowd announcing last call. Bartenders would stop serving at 11:50 to ensure no one held an illegal drink after midnight. The announcement triggered a final surge. Guests rushed the bar, shouting orders, waving cash. Di Taggia and his fellow bartenders poured as fast as physically possible. 11:50. The bartenders stopped. They stepped back from the bar in unison, a choreographed surrender. Dozens of customers still clamored for drinks. Their protests went unheeded. The law was 10 minutes away. The crowd grew quiet. Someone checked their pocket watch and called out the time. 11:58. Guests raised their glasses. 11:59. The entire room counted down the final seconds. Midnight, January 17th, 1920. The Volstead Act became law. For a moment, it's silence. Then someone threw their empty glass at the mirrored wall behind the bar. Crystal exploded. Others followed. Dozens of glasses shattered against mirrors and shelves. It was vandalism as eulogy, destruction as protest. Hotel security did not intervene. What was the point? Taglia watched the wreckage accumulate. Broken crystal carpeted the bar. The mirrors he had polished daily for 14 years were spider-webbed with cracks. He removed his white jacket, folded it carefully, placed it on the bar, and walked out. He never returned. The next morning, the Knickerbocker attempted to operate as a dry establishment. The restaurant served breakfast to 11 guests. Normal capacity was 200. The lobby was empty. Guest checkout occurred in silence. No one lingered. There was nothing to linger for. And the King Cole bar remained closed while workers swept up broken glass and assessed damage. Management debated whether to reopen it at all. They decided to convert the space into a temperance bar serving fruit punches and elaborate ice cream concoctions. The new menu featured items with names like the Prohibition Punch and the Volstead Fizz, attempts at irony that landed as desperation. The Temperance Bar opened on January 20th. First day revenue, $90. The old bar had generated that amount in 30 minutes. Within 1 week, hotel revenue dropped 62% compared to the same week in 1919. Room occupancy fell to 30%. Restaurant reservations evaporated. The Temperance Bar attracted curiosity seekers who bought one drink and left. No one stayed. No one lingered. The entire economic model had been predicated on alcohol lubricating spending. Without it, customers had no reason to remain. Management called an emergency meeting. The hotel had 90 days of operating capital remaining. After that, they would be unable to meet payroll or pay suppliers. They needed to replace $240,000 in annual bar revenue immediately. They needed a miracle. They got desperation instead. Chapter 7. The Desperate Pivot. Management tried everything. Tea rooms, soda fountains, live orchestras, anything to fill the space where liquor once flowed. February 1920, the Knickerbocker launched afternoon tea dances in the former King Cole bar. They hired a 10-piece orchestra to play from 2 until 6 daily. They served imported teas, finger sandwiches, and French pastries. They decorated the space with palms and fresh flowers. They advertised it as refined entertainment for sophisticated New Yorkers. First week attendance, 43 guests total. Revenue, $212. Orchestra cost, $350 weekly. The tea dances lost money before accounting for food costs or staff wages. Management persisted. They tried evening concerts featuring classical musicians. They hosted poetry readings. They organized bridge tournaments with cash prizes. Nothing worked. The Knickerbocker's clientele had not come for tea or poetry or bridge. They came to drink in glamorous surroundings with famous people. Remove the drinking and the glamour and fame became irrelevant. March 1920. The hotel slashed room rates from $12 to $7 per night, in hoping to attract new customers who could not previously afford luxury accommodations. The strategy backfired. Wealthy guests interpreted cheaper rates as declining prestige. Occupancy dropped further. the hotel was now charging less while serving fewer people. The restaurant attempted to compensate by raising menu prices. If fewer customers came, each one needed to spend more. Dinner prices increased from $20 to $28 per person. Reservations dropped 30% within 2 weeks. The premium clientele went elsewhere. The hotel was bleeding from every revenue stream simultaneously. Staff layoffs began in April. The hotel dismissed 50 employees, mostly housekeeping and kitchen workers. This saved $8,000 monthly, but reduced service quality. Guest complaints increased. Rooms were cleaned less frequently. Maintenance requests took days to address. The Knickerbocker was cannibalizing the infrastructure that justified premium pricing. May 1920. Management installed a soda fountain in the former bar space. 20 chrome and leather stools, a marble counter, an elaborate menu of ice cream concoctions, phosphates, and egg creams. They marketed it as modern and wholesome, the future of American refreshment. The soda fountain attracted teenagers and families, demographics that had never patronized the Knickerbocker. They occupied seats for hours while spending 90 cents. The old bar customers had spent $5 in 30 minutes. The soda fountain generated revenue of $60 daily. The bar had generated $600. The numbers became increasingly brutal. June revenue, $40,000. Operating costs, $56,000. Monthly loss, $16,000. July was worse. August worse still. The hotel was burning through its capital reserves at terrifying speed. Management tried renting ground floor space to outside businesses. They leased part of the former bar to a florist. They allowed a newsstand to operate in the lobby. They were subdividing the palace, admitting through action that the Knickerbocker could no longer sustain itself as a unified luxury hotel. September 1920. Occupancy hit 20%. 300 guest rooms sat empty. Heating costs for winter were approaching. The hotel could not afford to heat 14 floors for 100 occupied rooms. Management closed the top 6 floors entirely. Guests were consolidated on floors 3 through 8. The upper floors were abandoned, ghostly, their baccarat chandeliers dark. The Knickerbocker was dying in installments. Each cost-cutting measure degraded the experience further. Each degradation drove away more customers. Each customer loss required more cuts. The spiral accelerated. October 1920. The hotel stopped replacing broken furniture. Frayed carpets went unrepaired. Light bulbs burned out and stayed dark. The palace was developing visible wounds. Management held another emergency meeting. The numbers were unambiguous. At current revenue levels, the hotel would deplete all remaining capital by February 1921. After that, bankruptcy was inevitable. They had 3 options: find new investors willing to inject cash into a failing property, radically restructure operations to survive on minimal revenue, or begin liquidating assets. No investors emerged. Restructuring had already been attempted and failed. That left liquidation. November 1920. The Knickerbocker began selling its own organs to stay alive for 1 more month. Chapter 8. When the furniture went to auction. By November 1920, the Knickerbocker began selling its own organs to stay alive for 1 more month. The wine cellar went first. Before Prohibition, the hotel had maintained a collection of 12,000 bottles representing vintners from France, Italy, Germany, and California. The collection was worth an estimated $40,000 at retail prices. Under Volstead, it was contraband. The hotel could not legally sell wine. but it could sell the bottles to private collectors who would dispose of the contents themselves. This legal fiction allowed the hotel to liquidate the cellar. They advertised a private auction for November 8, 1920. 73 bidders attended, mostly wealthy individuals stocking home cellars before enforcement tightened. The wine sold for $18,000, less than half its pre-prohibition value. Buyers knew the hotel was desperate. They negotiated accordingly. Management accepted the loss. $18,000 bought 2 more months of operation. December 1920. The hotel auctioned the baccarat chandeliers. There were 8 of them throughout the public spaces. Each featured hundreds of hand-cut crystals suspended from gilded bronze frames. They weighed 300 pounds and required special installation. The chandeliers had cost $22,000 when imported from France in 1906. They were works of art. They sold for $6,700 total, less than 1/3 of original value. The buyers were demolition contractors who would dismantle them for parts. Individual crystals fetched better prices than intact fixtures. The chandeliers that had illuminated Manhattan's elite for 14 years were reduced to inventory. Workers removed them in January 1921. The lobby ceiling showed rectangular scars where fixtures had hung. Management installed cheap electric pendants as replacements. They cost $40 each and looked like it. February 1921. The Persian rugs went to auction. The hotel had layered imported carpets throughout the ground floor, some dating to the 18th century. Combined value, $15,000. Sale price, $4,200. The rugs were rolled up, carted away, sold to private estates and gentlemen's clubs. The lobby floor became visible, scuffed marble that had been hidden for 15 years. March 1921. The hotel sold the custom furniture from the King Cole Bar. 40 leather club chairs, 20 marble-topped tables. The bar itself, 40 feet of carved mahogany. Everything was auctioned in lots. Buyers treated it as salvage. The bar sold for $800 to a speakeasy operator who installed it in a basement on 52nd Street. The chairs scattered to private homes and offices. The tables became scrap. Each sale was an admission of defeat. Each auction was public humiliation. The Knickerbocker was cannibalizing itself in plain view of Manhattan. Newspapers covered the auctions with barely concealed schadenfreude. The hotel that had defined glamour was reduced to liquidating its entrails for grocery money. April 1921. Staff payroll checks bounced. Employees quit en masse. The hotel was down to 70 workers from a peak of 320. Service effectively ended. Maids cleaned rooms once weekly. The restaurant operated 3 days per week with a skeleton crew. The front desk was staffed only during business hours. May 1921. The hotel stopped paying utility bills. Electric company threatened service cutoff. Management negotiated a payment plan, promising to resume full payments once occupancy recovered. The electric company was not optimistic, but agreed to partial payments rather than forcing the building dark. June 1921. Occupancy reached 12%. 67 rooms occupied out of 556. Most guests were long-term residents who had negotiated monthly rates and refused to leave. They were squatters in a dying palace, paying minimal rent to inhabit rooms that once commanded premium prices. The hotel's mortgage holder, a syndicate of banks that had financed Astor's original $5 million construction loan, demanded payment. The hotel had defaulted on 3 consecutive monthly installments. The banks threatened foreclosure. Management begged for forbearance, arguing that foreclosure would guarantee total loss. Better to allow the hotel to operate and recoup something than seize a failing property worth less than the debt. The banks agreed to extend the default period through December 1921, but made clear there would be no further extensions. July 1921. Management sold the marble mantles from guest room fireplaces. There were 80 mantles throughout the building, imported Italian marble with carved details. They were architectural elements, part of the building's bones. Removing them left holes in walls. The mantles sold for $6,000. Workers spent 2 weeks extracting them, leaving the guest room scarred and diminished. The hotel used the money to pay 2 months of overdue coal bills. Winter was coming. The building needed heat more than it needed marble. By autumn 1921, and the Knickerbocker had sold everything of portable value. What remained was infrastructure too expensive to remove or too integral to building function. The hotel was a stripped carcass, its elegance removed and sold piece by piece. November 1921. Management sent a letter to the mortgage holders formally requesting foreclosure. They were surrendering. The hotel could not survive. Better to end it deliberately than collapse in total chaos. The banks took 6 months to process the foreclosure. During that time, the Knickerbocker existed in limbo, neither operating nor officially closed. A handful of guests remained. A skeleton staff showed up sporadically. The building breathed, but barely. The end came not with drama, but with paperwork. Chapter 9. The doors close forever. On May 1st, 1923, the Knickerbocker Hotel locked its doors and became a tomb of its own history. There was no ceremony, no final party, no gathering of the famous people who had made the hotel legendary. The last 12 guests checked out on April 30th. They carried their own luggage down silent staircases because no bellhops remained. They settled their bills in cash because the hotel no longer maintained bank accounts. They walked out into Times Square without looking back. The final staff member was Margaret O'Connor, a housekeeper who had worked at the Knickerbocker since opening day in 1906. She was 62 years old. For 17 years, she had cleaned guest rooms, changed linens, polished mirrors. On her final day, she walked through the empty floors one last time, room by room, closing curtains and turning off lights. And she locked the employee entrance behind her at 6 o'clock in the evening and placed the key in the mail slot. The building stood empty for the first time since construction. Foreclosure transferred ownership to the bank syndicate in June 1923. They had loaned Astor $5 million in 1905. The loan had been repaid down to $3.2 million when the hotel defaulted. The banks now owned a 14-story building worth less than the remaining debt. They wanted to minimize losses, not operate a hotel. Within weeks, they sold the property to Columbia University for $3 million, a 50% loss from Astor's original investment. Columbia had no interest in hospitality. They needed office space for their expanding administrative operations. The Knickerbocker's location, prestige, and physical grandeur were irrelevant. What mattered was square footage and price per square foot. Columbia took possession in August 1923. They hired a construction crew to gut the interior. The work began on the upper floors and descended systematically. Guest rooms were stripped to studs. Bathrooms were demolished. The custom furniture that had not sold at auction was smashed and hauled away. Walls were knocked down and rebuilt according to new floor plans optimized for office use. Linoleum replaced the remaining carpets. Acoustic tiles covered ornate plaster ceilings. Fluorescent lights hung where baccarat chandeliers had once sparkled. The ground floor transformation was most brutal. The lobby lost its marble panels. Workers sledgehammered them off the walls and carted them to a landfill. The geometric mosaic floor was covered with industrial carpeting. The restaurant became a cafeteria with metal tables and folding chairs. The King Cole Bar, the room that had generated 48% of the hotel's profit, became a storage area for filing cabinets. By November 1923, the renovation was complete. The Knickerbocker had been erased from the inside out. Columbia University moved administrative staff into 320 offices spread across 14 floors. Secretaries sat where opera singers had slept. Accountants worked where Astors had entertained. The building functioned, but everything that had made it the Knickerbocker was gone. The name survived only on the exterior. Columbia left the original signage on the building's facade, not out of respect, but out of cost savings. Removing stone-carved letters would have been expensive. So the building continued to announce itself as the Knickerbocker, while housing an identity that had nothing to do with hospitality or grandeur or any of the qualities the name once represented. Times Square continued its transformation around the corpse. More theaters opened. Electric signs grew larger and brighter. The neighborhood became exactly what Astor had predicted, the entertainment capital of America. But the Knickerbocker played no role in that success. It had died 3 years too early, killed by Prohibition before it could adapt to the Times Square it had helped create. The irony was savage. In 1933, 10 years after the Knickerbocker closed, the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition. Alcohol became legal again. Yet bars reopened throughout Manhattan. Hotels that had survived the dry years by operating speakeasies or radical restructuring now thrived in the renewed legal market. The Knickerbocker could have been one of them. It could have weathered the decade and emerged triumphant. But it had surrendered too quickly, liquidated too desperately, closed too permanently. The building's fate was sealed by timing as much as law. If Prohibition had ended in 1925 instead of 1933, the Knickerbocker might have survived. If management had been willing to operate illegally, running a speakeasy disguised as a hotel, they might have preserved enough revenue to endure. If they had found investors willing to absorb losses for 10 years, betting on eventual repeal, the hotel could have reopened. Instead, the Knickerbocker became a cautionary tale about fragility and dependence. It was a palace built on a foundation of vice. When that foundation was outlawed, everything built upon it collapsed. No amount of marble or crystal or imported carpets could compensate for the loss of the economic engine that had powered its existence. The building survived, but the Knickerbocker was dead. What remained was a shell wearing a famous name, housing anonymous bureaucrats in rooms that once sheltered fame itself. The transformation was complete. The tomb was occupied. Chapter 10. The building that forgot its name. For 70 years, the Knickerbocker existed as anonymous office space, its glittering past buried beneath acoustic tiles and cubicles. Generations of Columbia University employees worked in the building without knowing its history. They rode elevators where Caruso had ridden. They walked hallways where Diamond Jim Brady had walked. They ate lunch in a cafeteria that had once been Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. None of them knew. The building offered no clues. the architectural details that survived were hidden or disguised. Original moldings disappeared behind drywall. The grand staircase was closed off and used for storage. Windows that had once framed views of Times Square's electric spectacle were covered with Venetian blinds that stayed closed. The building turned inward, rejecting its location and its past. Occasionally, someone would notice the name carved into the facade and ask about it. The answers were vague. It used to be a hotel, so it closed a long time ago. The specifics were lost. The Knickerbocker story became institutional amnesia. The neighborhood around it transformed repeatedly. Times Square in the 1930s was depression-battered but defiant. The 1940s brought wartime energy and crowds. The 1950s saw the rise of television and the decline of live theater. The 1960s brought urban decay. The 1970s turned Times Square into a district of sex shops and peep shows. The 1980s saw early gentrification attempts. Through all these changes, the Knickerbocker remained inert. It was backdrop. It did not participate in the neighborhood's evolution. While other buildings adapted, hosting new businesses or converting to new uses, the Knickerbocker simply persisted as office space for Columbia's ever-expanding bureaucracy. The building developed the institutional smell common to old offices: stale coffee, copy machine toner, decades of cigarette smoke absorbed into walls before smoking bans. Humanity in its most mundane form, utterly unlike the glamour that had once defined these rooms. In 1993, Columbia University decided to consolidate administrative offices into a new campus building. The Knickerbocker was no longer needed. They sold it to a real estate investment firm for $12 million, 4 times what Columbia had paid in 1923, but still below the building's potential value given its Times Square location. The investment firm leased the space to various tenants: law offices, accounting firms. A telemarketing company occupied 3 floors. The building became generic commercial real estate, indistinguishable from thousands of similar properties throughout Manhattan. The name on the facade was the only remaining connection to its former identity. Years passed. The building aged ungracefully. Maintenance was deferred. The facade developed water stains. Windows needed replacement. The mechanical systems were original to 1906, a century old and failing. The building was profitable as rental property, but only because owners avoided capital investment. By the early 2000s, the Knickerbocker was functionally obsolete. Modern office tenants demanded open floor plans, advanced HVAC systems, high-speed internet infrastructure. The building offered none of these. Vacancy rates climbed, rent declined. The property became a problem asset in the investment firm's portfolio. In 2006, exactly 100 years after the hotel's original opening, a development group approached the owners with an audacious proposal: convert the building back into a hotel, restore the Knickerbocker name, market it as historical luxury reborn. The developers believed Times Square's ongoing revitalization created demand for upscale hospitality. They envisioned the Knickerbocker reclaiming its place as the neighborhood's premier hotel. The owners sold the building for $38 million. The developers immediately committed $80 million more for renovation. The total investment of $118 million dwarfed Astor's original $5 million. Adjusted for inflation, the numbers were comparable, but the stakes felt higher, and the developers were betting that Manhattan wanted the Knickerbocker back. The question was whether resurrection was even possible. Could a building that had spent 70 years as office space ever truly become a hotel again? Could you restore soul along with marble? Could renovation recover what demolition had destroyed? The answer would prove complicated. Chapter 11. The resurrection that was not really a resurrection. In 2008, developers spent $80 million to restore the Knickerbocker's name while erasing most of its soul. The renovation was marketed as historical restoration. Press releases promised the return of Gilded Age grandeur. Architectural renderings showed opulent lobbies and sumptuous guest rooms that evoked the original hotel. The developers hired historians to research the Knickerbocker's layout and design. They consulted photographs and floor plans from the hotel's glory years. Then they ignored most of what they learned. The new Knickerbocker bore the old name and address, but was fundamentally a contemporary luxury hotel occupying a historical corpse. The developers faced a dilemma. Modern guests expected amenities impossible in 1906. They wanted king-sized beds. They demanded private bathrooms with rainfall showers. They required high-speed internet, flat-screen televisions, and climate control. Guest rooms had to meet current building codes, fire safety standards, and accessibility requirements. Authentic restoration was incompatible with commercial viability. The developers chose viability. The new floor plan bore no resemblance to the original. Guest rooms were larger, fewer in number, configured for contemporary expectations. The hotel opened with 330 rooms instead of 556. Each room featured modern furniture, flat-screen TVs, and marble bathrooms. The design aesthetic referenced 1906 through color palette and decorative touches, but the actual experience was unmistakably 21st century. The ground floor transformation was most revealing. The developers recognized they needed a signature bar to echo the King Cole Room's legendary status. They created a rooftop bar instead, capitalizing on Times Square views impossible in the original hotel. They named it St. Cloud, a reference to nothing in the Knickerbocker's history. The space was sleek, modern, dominated by glass and steel. It bore zero resemblance to mahogany and mirrors of the King Cole Bar. The original King Cole Bar location on the ground floor became a restaurant called Charlie Palmer at the Knick. Upscale American cuisine, white tablecloths, contemporary design. There was no attempt to recreate the bar that had generated 48% of the hotel's original profit. The developers understood that nostalgia had limits. Modern guests wanted innovation, not museum recreation. The lobby was redesigned from scratch. The original 30-foot ceilings were retained because removing them was impossible, but everything else changed. Modern furniture, contemporary lighting, minimalist design philosophy. The space was elegant, but its elegance was aspirational rather than historical. It looked forward, not back. The baccarat chandeliers were never replaced. The Persian rugs never returned. The Italian marble mantles remained wherever they had been sold in 1921. The developers made no effort to locate or reacquire the original furnishings. Authentic pieces would have been impractical, impossibly expensive, and frankly incompatible with contemporary operations. What emerged was a ship of Theseus' philosophical problem rendered in stone and steel. The building occupied the same footprint. It served the same function. It bore the same name. But was it actually the Knickerbocker? The hotel opened in February 2009 during a global financial crisis. Timing was unfortunate. Luxury travel collapsed. Corporate expense accounts evaporated. The new Knickerbocker struggled to fill rooms at the premium rates required to justify the renovation investment. The hotel cycled through management companies, ownership groups, branding partnerships. It was affiliated with Starwood, then Felcour, then Highgate. Each change brought operational adjustments, but the fundamental challenge remained. The Knickerbocker had been reborn into a Times Square vastly different from the one Astor had bet on. The neighborhood was now dominated by chain restaurants, souvenir shops, and tourist attractions. The elite social scene had migrated elsewhere. The hotel's natural clientele, wealthy New Yorkers seeking glamorous nights out, no longer considered Times Square their playground. The neighborhood was too commercial, too touristy, too loud. The new Knickerbocker attracted business travelers and tourists, demographics that had never defined the original hotel. These guests appreciated the location and amenities, but they did not create the cultural mythology that had made the first Knickerbocker legendary. They did not make history. They occupied rooms temporarily and moved on. The hotel functioned successfully by contemporary standards. Occupancy rates stabilized. Revenue met projections. Reviews praised the rooftop bar and the renovated rooms. But success was measured in operational metrics, not cultural impact. The new Knickerbocker was a nice hotel in Times Square. The original had been a defining institution of American luxury. The resurrection proved that buildings can return from extinction, but the thing that returns is never quite the same thing that died. The new Knickerbocker was elaborate taxidermy, a beautiful replica that captured the form but missed the essence. You cannot restore what time has consumed. You can only build something new and call it by an old name and hope that the name carries enough power to justify the pretense. Chapter 12. What Prohibition Really Killed. The Knickerbocker's death proves that grandeur is not architecture or location, but the economic permission to exist. The hotel did not fail because Astor chose poorly. Times Square became exactly what he predicted. It did not fail because the building was flawed. The architecture was magnificent. It did not fail because management was incompetent. They operated profitably for 14 years. The Knickerbocker failed because a constitutional amendment severed its economic foundation. 48% of net profit disappeared overnight. No business can survive losing half its income while maintaining full expenses. The hotel's dependence on bar revenue was not a flaw in planning. It was the inevitable result of the economics of luxury hospitality. High-end hotels operate on thin margins. They require supplementary revenue streams that generate premium markups. In the early 20th century, that meant alcohol. Prohibition proved that legal frameworks can destroy cultural institutions faster than any economic force. The law did not target the Knickerbocker specifically. It was not designed to close hotels. But constitutional morality crusades do not account for collateral damage. The temperance movement wanted to eliminate vice. They succeeded. The cost was thousands of businesses and tens of thousands of jobs. The Knickerbocker was one casualty among many. The hotel's story reveals the uncomfortable relationship between vice and beauty. Luxury often depends on vice for funding. Casinos finance elaborate resorts. Nightclubs subsidize expensive real estate. Legal gambling built Las Vegas. Legal marijuana is rebuilding entire Colorado towns. The Knickerbocker's King Cole Bar was no different. It sold alcohol at enormous markups to people who wanted to drink in beautiful rooms surrounded by famous people. That transaction funded the Baccarat chandeliers and Italian marble and custom carpets. When we outlaw vice, we often destroy the beauty that vice financed. This is rarely the intention, but it is frequently the outcome. Prohibition's architects wanted sober, productive Americans. They got shuttered hotels and unemployment. They eliminated one problem by creating others. The Knickerbocker's resurrection in 2009 demonstrates that buildings can be reanimated, but resurrection is never complete. The new hotel operates successfully, but it is not the cultural institution the original was. It cannot be. The context that created the first Knickerbocker no longer exists. Times Square is not a neighborhood of elite socialites anymore. Luxury hotels are not rare. Bar culture is ubiquitous, not exclusive. The original Knickerbocker mattered because it was unique. It stood at a specific intersection of time and place and culture. It captured something ephemeral about Gilded Age excess and Jazz Age sophistication. When it closed in 1923, that moment closed with it. The building that reopened in 2009 occupies the same address but not the same cultural space. This is the ultimate legacy of the Knickerbocker's death. It teaches that grandeur is fragile, that institutions depend on permissions that can be revoked without warning, that beauty and vice are business partners, whether we acknowledge it or not. The hotel was a magnificent creature that required constant feeding. When we outlawed its food source, we starved it to death. We did not mean to. We were pursuing moral improvement, but the creature died anyway. The question the Knickerbocker leaves us is uncomfortable. How many other palaces exist only because we permit the vices that finance them? How much beauty depends on transactions we find morally troubling? How many institutions would collapse if we enforced different laws or adopted different values? The answers vary, but the principle holds. Grandeur is not stone and crystal. It is economic permission. It is cultural acceptance. It is the freedom to sell what people want to buy, even if what they want is vice wrapped in elegance. The Knickerbocker sold vice wrapped in baccarat chandeliers and Italian marble. For 14 years, America gave permission. Then we changed our minds. The hotel died, not dramatically, but through slow financial starvation. By the time Prohibition ended 10 years later, the building had forgotten it was ever a hotel. Now it remembers, sort of. The name is back. The address is the same. But the soul is gone, sold at auction in 1921, along with the mahogany bar and the crystal glasses. You can restore a building. You cannot restore the moment that gave it meaning. The Knickerbocker is back, but the Knickerbocker is gone. Both statements are true. The building stands. The institution does not. This is what happens when you kill a palace by outlawing the thing that made the palace worth building. Beauty and vice remain business partners. We just pretend otherwise until the next constitutional amendment proves us wrong.